No creature is more destructive than a human, and we have been guilty of destroying so much natural beauty that surrounds us. However, we're also capable of creating our own beauty, whether it is in buildings, paintings, sculptures, or photography. But unfortunately, no human creation lasts forever, whether it be eroded through natural decay or lost because of some other unfortunate mishap, including human blunders. The following are 10 historical artifacts lost to stupidity. Number 10. Ruined war footage. The D-Day landings was one of the most brutal events of World War II, where over 200,000 soldiers were either wounded or died as they left the boats on the beaches of Normandy, France. One brave wartime photographer called Robert Capa worked for Life magazine and was in the second wave of landings. He was able to capture footage of this bloodbath. Wartime photographers put themselves in as much danger as any soldier, as the enemy did not discriminate between a telephoto lens or a gun pointing at them. Capa's personal mantra was, "If your pictures aren't good enough, you aren't close enough." Holding his camera above water with hands shaking as troops around him were dropping like flies, Capa managed to capture 106 close-up images of the invasion and by some miracle managed to survive. On his return to London, Capa handed his precious rolls of film over to staff members at Life magazine for developing. The staff member then handed the duty off to 15-year-old lab assistant Dennis Banks, a darkroom technician. In his haste, the technician dried the film too quickly. The excess heat melted the emulsion on all but 10 of the frames. Those that remained were blurred, surreal shots which succinctly conveyed the chaos and confusion of the day. Of the 4 rolls of film that Capa had gone to hell and back to capture, Banks melted 3.5 of them. Ironically, the heat damage done to the surviving 11 photos is what lent them the blurry, otherworldly quality that is part of what makes them so memorable to this day. Number 9. Leonardo da Vinci ink sketch. Imagine the world's amazement when a new Leonardo da Vinci ink sketch worth millions of dollars was discovered stashed among drawings by Italian draftsman and painter Stefano della Bella. The sketch was of Orpheus being attacked by the Furies. It came to light 3 years ago among prints when restorers treated the work with alcohol and water to loosen it from its backing. The ink began to disappear. The restorers utterly failed to follow the common protocol of testing any restoration technique on a small, minimally noticeable area first, rather than basting the entire work in solution. As a result, the world was left with a blank piece of paper that was once owned by Leonardo da Vinci. The disaster was revealed by Professor Carlo Pedretti, a leading Da Vinci expert, in an article in the Milan Daily newspaper. He wrote, "I will not say where it happened or whose fault it was, because it is still hoped that we can find a way to recover the image through modern technology. But it is highly unlikely." He said that he had been asked to contact laboratories and research institutes around the world to seek ways of reversing this blunder. Professor Carlo Federici, director of the Central Institute for Book Pathology in Rome, said, "Even a beginner knows that the first thing you have to do is to test inks for their solubility." Leonardo's images are the very symbol of human creativity and science, and there are not many of his graphic works in existence. Professor Federici added, "Here we have material damage that is absolutely irreversible." Number 8. Demolition of Shakespeare's final home. People love to connect to history's greatest minds and love to visit the places they were known to frequent. This was no different 2.5 centuries ago, when tourists flocked to New Place at Stratford-upon-Avon, the final home of William Shakespeare, said to be where he penned some of his greatest works, such as The Tempest. Unfortunately, the home's owner, Reverend Francis Gastrell, hated all the tourist attention, where obsessed crowds of people would frequent his house. They would gather around a large mulberry tree in the garden that Shakespeare had planted. Reverend Gaskell got so fed up with droves of tourists gathering around the tree and drawing it that he chopped it down and used it for firewood. The townsfolk responded by running the Reverend out of town. This did not deter Reverend Gastrell, and even though he had been run out of town, 3 years after the tree debacle, Gastrell had new place razed to the ground. Today, not much remains of it beyond the remnants of the foundation and a single sketch of how it once stood. I suppose we ask the question, why the bloody hell did this crazy man buy Shakespeare's house in the first place? What did he think would happen? Of course there would have been hundreds of visitors. Number 7. Priceless paintings burnt in an oven. Back in late 2012, a gang of Romanian art thieves entered Rotterdam's Constel Gallery and stole 7 paintings by Picasso, Monet, Gauguin, Matisse and Lucien Freud, where the combined worth of the collection was estimated to be worth millions. 3 men, led by Radu Dagaru, simply walked into the museum and then out with the paintings. Unfortunately, finding a buyer for priceless stolen artwork isn't so simple. With no one willing to touch the stolen paintings, Dagaru gave them to his mother, who buried them in a cemetery in the small Romanian village of Caraccilu. Dagaru and his cohorts were arrested for the art theft based on security footage. Now prosecutors had to find the stolen paintings. Dagaru's mother became extremely nervous when the authorities came a-knocking in search of the stolen artwork. She then went out to the graveyard, dug the paintings up and proceeded to burn them in her oven. Forensic experts later analysed the contents of her oven and found the remnants of pigments consistent with those used in the stolen paintings. Number 6. Ripping apart the Star-Spangled Banner. The most treasured possession of the Smithsonian Museum is the Star-Spangled Banner, one of the very first American flags to be manufactured during the Revolutionary War. Back then, the flag was made with 15 stars, but this flag only showed 14. You would like to imagine that the missing pieces had been damaged in battle, being blasted by cannon fire, or at least something as dramatic as that. But alas, the true story is somewhat more subdued. All those missing pieces were cut off with scissors and given away as stocking fillers. After it flew proudly over Baltimore during the final battle of the war, Lieutenant Colonel George Armistead took the impressively huge 30-foot by 42-foot flag home as a keepsake. When Armistead died, he passed it on to his wife, and when she died in 1861, it passed again to their daughter, Georgiana Armistead, who thought it was so lovely that she had other grand plans. Georgiana began to shop the banner around to museums that wanted to borrow it, but it wasn't enough for people to just see it on display. They wanted to own a piece of history too. And so, bombarded with requests for fragments of the flag, Georgiana began to cut pieces off of it and handing them out to whoever she deemed worthy. It was considered a great honour, usually bestowed on worthy folks like war heroes and famed politicians. By the time horrified Smithsonian conservationists halted Georgiana's flag snipping exercises, more than 200 square feet of it had been removed and mailed off to its collectors, including one of the stars. It has been said that she even gifted a piece to Abraham Lincoln, but this was highly unlikely, as Georgiana was rather sympathetic to the Confederate cause. Number 5. Native American artworks destroyed by vandalism. For more than 1,000 years, the Native Americans living in the Colorado River Valley considered Grapevine Canyon sacred ground. It contains some of the best preserved rock paintings and carvings of their entire civilization, and has survived much over many years. But it did not survive one fool. In 2010, David Smith decided that this priceless relic of our pre-colonial past would look a lot better covered in paint splatters. For some inexplicable reason, this moron was hiking through Grapevine Canyon with a paintball gun, no doubt blasting away at the local fauna. One thing led to another, and the priceless Indian artwork was destroyed by this idiot who imagined he was playing one of his war games. When Smith was caught after this shooting spree, he offered no excuse for it. He even admitted to seeing the warning signs that the area contained a historical monument, but still blindly went ahead with his mindless destruction. Amazingly, this moron was only fined $10,000 in damages, and unfortunately, due to the type of paint he used, it cannot be cleaned without further damaging the rocks. This type of destruction is precisely why some areas actually refuse to label sacred ground so as not to attract vandals. Number 4. Ancient pyramid turned into a road. The Nomad Pyramid was one of the largest Mayan pyramids in the small Central American country of Belize. Built 2,000 years ago and standing over 100 feet tall, it sat at the center of a settlement consisting of 81 buildings and was a sacred prayer location for thousands of Mayans. Unfortunately, in 2013, builders decided that the pyramid would be more useful if it was a road. So they demolished the pyramid and used it for paving materials. Their excuse for the destruction was that technically the pyramid was on private land and they had the permission of the owner. The Belize government didn't take kindly to this blatant vandalism and pursued criminal fines over the matter. Strangely though, they were only fined $10,000, which is such a pathetic fine, it serves as no deterrent for any future property vandals. Number 3. Ancient tombs destroyed for a rail project. While constructing the Guangzhou Metro Line 6, contractors in China destroyed 5 ancient tombs in one day. What makes this story more unusual, however, is that archaeologists were actually in the process of excavating the tomb at the time. They had a whole dig site set up and everything, tents, tools. The researchers were caught so unaware by the tomb destruction that they literally left the intact site on Friday night and returned Saturday morning to total destruction. The workers put the whole incident down to a misunderstanding with authorities, claiming they did not know the tombs could not be bulldozed. As many as a dozen other treasure sites have been destroyed in this way by the very same construction company. So this company must be utterly corrupt and staffed entirely by grossly incompetent workers. Number 2. Valuable Chinese vase rendered worthless. In 2008, a London family took a closer look at a rather shabby lamp that their grandmother had been using to light her home, and noting the telltale blue and white paint scheme that all expensive things have, wondered whether it might be worth something. After having the lamp professionally evaluated, they found that it was of Chinese origin. More specifically, it was dated back to the early 18th century during the Qing dynasty, which made it a fairly valuable piece of pottery, worth around £50,000. But there was a problem. The vase had been converted into a lamp where someone had drilled a tiny hole in the base and poked a power cord through it. Even though the hole was barely noticeable, it did slightly decrease the value of the vase to around £6,000. Number 1. 3,500-year-old tree burned down by a meth addict. A bold cypress tree called the Senator once stood in a central Florida swamp in Seminole County for 3,500 years. It was the 5th oldest tree in the world and stood 118 feet high. It was hollow inside, which some say helped it survive Florida's logging boom that took much of the old growth. During a meth party, a woman named Sarah Barnes accidentally burned the several thousand-year-old tree to the ground. More than 800 feet of fire hose and a helicopter dropping water on the blaze wasn't enough to save it, and the tree collapsed under its own weight in just 3 hours. Barnes didn't call anybody because she was too busy using her cell phone to snap pics of the inferno. She showed them to her friends, giggling that, "I can't believe I just burned a tree older than Jesus."